groups sort of split off, forming stuff like the Ku Klux Klan, and these eventually, reintegrated themselves into the police over time as the police became increasingly militarized and gained more and more funding over the course of the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. And also anti-war demonstrations of the 60s and 70s. Police forces also became increasingly more militarized to suppress leftist movements. Actually, a little bit of a tangent. So in 1968, SDSers at FSU were actually, arrested, prevented from, doing any activism at bayonet point. They have bayonets wild. I think Faith is probably going to talk a little bit more about that. So next slide. So increasing militarization. So as I mentioned, police became more militarized over the course of the civil rights movement and the protest movement against the Vietnam War. This over here is a little bit of a graph drawing. Police budgets have basically nearly tripled since 1977. It used to be, in 1977, it was $42.3 billion. In 2017, it was $114.5 billion. Police, with all this money, now began to set up shop on campuses and, suppress student activism. And this was worsened by the establishment of the 1033 program. After the Vietnam War was over and the war on terror was beginning, there was a bunch of excess military equipment that was just kind of lying around. So, next slide. So, established in 1997, and there's over 8,000 law enforcement agencies that have, gotten these various weapons, machine guns, aircrafts, these these armored vehicles like anti-mine and anti-tank vehicles and stuff. One of the police departments participating in this program is our very own ACPD. Next slide. So ACPD received several of these M16 cal 5.56 millimeter machine guns in July 2016 from the 1033 program at a discount, because all military equipment purchased through 1033 is at a discount. Next slide. They also received a hodgepodge of other things like ammunition, scopes, binoculars, some kind of drone vehicle thing. I'm focusing on the guns because they cannot be trusted with this equipment in general. So looking through the COLA request that I made, they actually lost a piece of equipment that they requested. It was assigned to some guy who quit his job. He left and he took it with him. They requested to search his house. They did not receive an answer, and that's it. So he just has this now. And because of this, they were briefly suspended, and they were reinstated back in May 1st, 2020. So they're currently still part of the 1033 program. Truman will discuss these issues more in depth. So next slide. So in conclusion, since its inception, the American police have been made specifically to crush any form of dissent, to uphold the institutions of capitalism and white supremacy, and protect private property, not people. This is a good quote from Warren v. District of Columbia. The duty to provide public services is owed to the public at large, and absent a special relationship between the police and an individual, no specific legal duty exists. Basically, we have no obligation to protect you from harm. The public at large, in this case, is the
there's no obligation for us to be protected by police. So if you have any more questions specifically about the history of police, there'll be a time at the end for them, and you can direct those questions to Kat. Our next speaker is Faith, and they're going to be talking about the history and a bit of current facts about police on campuses specifically. So give it up for Kat.
Hi, my name is Faith. I'm a student at CU Denver, and I'm studying sociology. Can you go to the next slide? Basically, obviously, as Kat has spoken about, the history of police is incredibly racist, but the history of campus police is almost even more racist. The popularization of university police in the 1960s was created from civil rights protests and protests of the Vietnam War. And so this resulted in a few different issues that were presented. The Orangeburg and the Kent State massacres. The Orangeburg massacre was essentially police fired shots on black protesters for the civil rights movement in Orangeburg, South Carolina. They killed 2 people and injured, I believe, 11 more. And then the Kent State massacre, as a few of the people in this group attended the university for a conference for the National SDS Convention. They found that in Kent State, Ohio, in 1970, May 4th, 1970, there were students who were protesting the Vietnam War, and they were massacred. 4 of them were killed by the National Guard. Now, this is a result of increasing militarization on campuses, seeing students as the enemy, essentially, whenever they are being, the campus are being questioned, or whenever the government or anybody is doing anything wrong. When students are turned into the enemy, this results in the militarization, which results in things like the Orangeburg and Kent State massacres. Basically, what happens in these situations with campus police is things like urban renewal, which is essentially gentrification. But they aim to, there was a UC Davis protest in 2011, which was an Occupy Wall Street protest, and they essentially, to drive them out, pepper sprayed a row of students. I believe it was 11 students as well, who were pepper sprayed, and
shame.
It was basically to drive them out of campus and get these people away from campus. They also, the whole roots of the police on campus was because of race relations in the 1960s and 70s. This resulted in massive police violence against students and workers who were protesting for labor and civil rights. University police forces responded to the tide of resistance with their presence, and that's what has led us to have almost all campuses have police departments on them. Essentially, it was used to suppress Vietnam War and civil rights protesters. Next slide, please. That being said, all of this is a result of political repression. Like I said, in the 2011 UC Davis protest, they were pepper sprayed because they were protesting the Occupy Wall Street. All of the students were seated and unarmed. They were not acting violently in any way, and this resulted in a suspension of the officer who did it. But regardless, this is all because of the militarization of campus police. Additionally, there was the Jackson State killings, which police fired shots into a women's dorm at Jackson State College, killing 2 and injuring 13. That was in response to a protest for civil rights. They were trying to, in fairness, there were people who were throwing rocks at cars, and that was what resulted in the response of the police, who shot and killed 3 people, which, in my personal opinion, is not just or fair. Basically, and then there was obviously the Kent State massacre, which students protesting the Vietnam War were killed. Next slide, please.
So before we get to the next slide, I want to give a little bit of a trigger warning. It is a picture from the Kent State massacre.
It's a very famous picture. You'll likely have seen it. It is a woman mourning over a dead body. So I do want to give a heads up before we get to it.
Thank you, Truman. Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, so this was the Kent State Massacre. It was the site, and some of the people in this room actually visited the site.
Yeah, I just want to speak on the Kent State incident specifically because I, along with a group of SDS students here at Denver SDS, recently got to have the chance to attend the National SDS Conference, which was held at Kent State and put on entirely by student activists at Kent State. And the reason they chose Kent State is because of its specific history with student activism. On May 4th, 1970, a group of National Guardsmen fired into a crowd of peaceful, unarmed students for 13 continuous seconds and killed 4 of them and injured, I think, over a dozen others. I can't remember the exact number. These student protesters were members of the former members of SDS. They had been banned from campus at that point, but the members were still actively organizing. And in most particularly, the Black United Students Union, a radical black student union. And it was directly as a result of their civil rights activism through nonviolent means that they were shot and killed. And afterwards, the media decried them as terrorists, that it was their fault. The governor of Florida at the time, despite having nothing to do with this incident, saw this picture, said the boy deserved it, and that the woman, I say woman, she was a 14-year-old girl, was herself a terrorist. It was in the response to incidents like these that campus police arose. And I just have to say, on a personal note, walking the site where this happens, seeing the bullet holes still in the infrastructure on campus, it's chilling, and it reminds you of the risks and the reasons for why we care about this and do this student activism. So I just wanted to share a bit of our history with the Kent State youth day.
One of the other main issues that I had briefly talked about is the idea of urban renewal or gentrification. Gentrification, if you are unaware, it goes on until all or most of the original working class occupiers are displaced and the whole social character of the district is changed. Chief Bibbs, who is the chief of Auraria Campus Police Department, or ACPD, has made a priority to attack the homeless community by enforcing laws surrounding loitering and trespassing. Obviously, this is discriminatory, as there are many students who are homeless as well. But a quote from him says, "More homeless people are meandering their way to the Auraria campus, but the campus police department is stumped." The first time we catch someone say on the 3rd floor of the Tivoli, they don't belong here, we'll explain that this part of the building is not for anyone not associated with the campus. By the 3rd or 4th time we see them, we'll go ahead and write a ticket for trespassing and ask them to leave. Obviously, if somebody is not hurting anybody, why would we write them a ticket for which they likely cannot pay? It just seems ridiculous to me. But like I said, this is incredibly discriminatory and contributes to the issue of gentrification of areas like that happened on this campus itself, where the Aurarians, the original Aurarians, were displaced in the efforts to build this campus, and that is literal definition of gentrification happening right here. Next slide, please. The current militarization is, as Kat was talking about, the 1033 program, which aims to give police on our campus military-grade equipment, such as the M16s. Many other police departments have also returned like Humvees, camouflage vehicles, drones, things like that. But they also, going back to the political repression side of things, they also participated in the political repression during the George Floyd and Elijah McClain protests. They were part of the people, or part of the, they worked with DPD and APD, which is Denver Police Department, and Aurora Police Department, and they worked to suppress people who were trying to protest for Black Lives Matter. back to the 1033 program, like I said, this is all just an effort to keep the students down and make sure that students, and it goes against the 9 points of policing by Robert Peel, who was the founder of police in Europe, which is the idea that police are there to protect and serve, which if they are using weapons on students and killing students, and have been for decades, that is not protecting and serving the community.
That was really great, Faye. Yeah, I think they said this really well, that we've seen how this happens in the past, and it never, having a militarized police force, especially on campus, it never leads to safety. It leads to student repression. It leads to violence. It leads to violence against innocent, unarmed civilians. So I'm really glad that Faith and Truman decided to share. Our next speaker is going to be Shivo, and he's going to be debunking some common myths that we're told about police. So give it up for Shivo.
Just to start off, to get right into it, I have some pictures pertaining to some myths that we're going to debunk. The first myth I'm addressing is to protect and serve, right? And let's just get right into it. So, this is a photo from the police mass shooting that happened very recently, where Denver police shot into a crowd of people. 6 were injured, and they were traumatized, really. To me, that's not protecting and serving, right? This is a photo of the train hitting the police car. I'm pretty sure you've all seen that, right? Where a woman was in this cruiser right here. In negligence, they left the car on the train tracks. And basically what happened is the train ran through and smashed the car and left it with 9 broken ribs. It's a miracle that she's alive. So those 2 cases are having to be community cases really, but next I want to get into something like the George Floyd protest and January 6th. So this is January 6th. I'm just going to show a progression of photos comparing January 6th to George Floyd. The police response to each of those protests, or protests, riots. So this is January 6th, right here. This is George Floyd. January 6th. George Floyd. January 6th. George Floyd. 6th. Floyd. 6th. Floyd. 6th. Just in case any of you were unaware of how many people were here. Floyd. 6th. Floyd. 6th. Right, okay. That's Floyd. Right here. Floyd. Floyd. 6th. Floyd. Now I'm gonna come back to that, because that ties into a lot of the other stuff I'm gonna talk about. But first, second, I guess, I want to address some more supporting evidence to the notion that protecting and serving is kind of ridiculous, especially in our society right now. So this right here is a man named Ron Finley. He is from South Central LA, and he founded or started a group called Green Grounds, LA Green Grounds. Now, South Central LA is a food desert, which means that there's not generally there's not many good sources of food, right? In his own words, he calls South Central LA the land of the drive-thrus and the drive-bys. So growing up in South Central, he saw rampant sickness, poverty, just a whole slew of things that happened to his community. So he took it upon himself to basically plant plants like garden, natural food, just in the medians of his like next to the sidewalk or in the street, or just the unused land that was around him in his community, so we could produce good food for the people. So basically, he did this. He gained. At first, he was kind of doing it himself and talking to other people about it. He started getting traction a little bit. A couple other people started to pitch in and shit like that. But eventually, the city gained wind of this, and they basically said, you can either rip your garden out, stop doing this, or we're gonna find you, right? And basically, what happened was this whole situation happened because someone drove by and reported. No one really knows who. But basically, they said he kind of turned that down, right? And then they came back and said, okay, so if you're not gonna do that, we're gonna give you a warning if you don't comply with that. And even after that, he didn't give in. But luckily, the police never came. But there was another incident later in which the Green Grounds group, who had then thereafter kicked off, become much larger, they seized this kind of plot of land that was just it was a lot, right? There was nothing there. It was grass, it was weeds, it was nothing. It was owned by some company who was just kind of holding on to it for landlord's sake, right? And basically, what happened is that they basically seized it and they wanted to start charging for the people they community garden. And the city came in and said, if you don't tear this down, you don't take everything out, or pay us $500,000, we're gonna come in and plow on God, right? Luckily, because their movement was so traction, they were able to raise enough money to pay the $500,000. But I guarantee you, if a lot of other people, he was lucky enough to have gained traction before this happened. So if he didn't have an audience of people who were supporting him or going along with what he thought, it wouldn't have happened. Right? That's one example of not necessarily protecting and serving. Basically, his case is interesting to me because when you hear the words protect and serve, you think protect and serve, right? When a man is trying to feed his family, uplift his community, bring health into his impoverished neighborhood, right? The police are basically used as a tool by the state to oppress those efforts. It's just very interesting to me that people can find a way to defend that, you know what I'm saying? And that's just one of many cases. He's a success story. He calls himself a gangster gardener or a guerrilla gardener. But there's many other people who try to do this stuff and did not succeed, right? This goes along with the idea that police themselves protect the system, protect capital, and protect the status quo. Now, what does it say about a society if a man trying to uplift his community plants, right, is threatened by the state, right? Massive fines with a warrant for planting in that dumbass little patch of grass that's in front of your sidewalk that no one cares about, no one uses. But if you just decide to use it yourself, right? They come in, okay, we're gonna give you a warrant if you don't comply with this. How's that, make you feel? Supposedly we live in a democracy, yet when we do democratic action, it's suppressed. This case in specific is again, like I said before, one of many. But it's though nothing bad happened with this man in particular. There's countless cases of people who have experienced this kind of oppression, not just with gardening, not just with things of that nature, but with protesting, with trying to bring awareness to certain issues, with the whole abortion thing, with George Floyd, all of that, with even much before that, like the other presenters pointed out, like very astutely, labor unions, organizing, all of that's all been repressed by this weird amalgamation of things that become a state that sees it as a threat to a certain group of people's power, right? In a system where you can be jailed because you grow your own food on unused and certain property, and most people don't have a living wage, where protesters and strikers are brutalized and arrested, where the basic necessities of life are provided free of charge despite being the richest nation on earth, where if you don't conform and give in and get a job, you become homeless and starve, only to be harassed by the state further and treated as if you aren't even human or aren't worthy of respect or generosity. Where others can invade countries and kill millions, where we can invade countries and kill millions, then face no repercussions. But if you try to get some food or pay your bill with a fake $20 bill, you get your head pressed on the ground by a cop for what? Enough to make you like keel over and die, right? And our very prosperity depends on is the direct result of oppression and horrible conditions in which other countries, which create the desperation required for people in these countries to accept extremely low wages, which in turn keeps our prices low and our economy stable. What kind of protecting and serving is that, really, right? If we're protecting and serving the status quo, which supposedly is for the best interest of the people, is that really protecting and serving? Who are you really protecting and what are you really serving, right? Our stability requires draconian oppression. That's the role of the police, to keep us in line. That's what it is. This man had a good quote that I'd like to put in this. He said, to change a community, you need to change the soil. We are the soil, right? Next slide. So this is the next myth. Only a few bad apples, right? We'll work pretty much all of this. And for this myth, I want to bring up this guy. Many of you might not know who he is. I didn't know until a while ago, a year ago or something like that. His name is Michael Wood Jr. He was an ex-cop. He was also a Marine as well before he was a cop. He left the police force because he encountered rampant racism, brutalization, just overall, just no checks and balances, just state violence that he did not want to be part of. Some of his experiences that he talks about in some interviews that he does, he talks about the toxic police culture and how kind of like the whole thing where there will be, most people will come into a certain number of people come into the police force wanting to protect the service, want to be heroes. It's that classic thing we've all heard kids say in our classes. I want to be a cop. I want to be a hero. I want to help people or save people. And he himself came into policing with this notion. He thought that he wanted to help people. You wanted to make things better. You wanted to bring hope and stability to communities, right? But when he joined, he saw a very different picture, and he was in the force for 11 years. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't justifiably continue to commit these actions against these communities that he was policing because he recognized it for what it was. In his words, the system of police is fundamentally broken because to be a good cop, you should meet a certain number of quota, a certain number of arrests at quota, right? You're supposed to live up to these marks instead of reducing crime, which means that the way that policing basically works is that you don't get paid based on, you don't get amended, you don't get promoted, you don't get praised or paid based off of how much crime you're reducing. You get paid off of how many people you catch, how many people you arrest. This is on a daily basis. This is part of the police culture. In his own words, also, if there's no crime, there's no funding for the officers themselves, which is crazy because we see the massive police budget, like over $100 billion. That is enough. That just in and of itself is larger than most military spending in many other countries. Many. It is wild to me that policing kind of works that way because it highlights, like if you really look at what it is, it highlights this kind of, we have to address the symptoms, not the problem mentality, this idea that, we're not gonna go deep in the roots and like pull that shit out. We're gonna cut cut the leaves off and shit, hoping that they don't grow back. They're always gonna grow back. You know what I'm saying? Yep. He was promoted to work in a predominantly white neighborhood after I think 4 or 5 years, and wasn't able to meet his numbers. He was constantly being berated. Like at this time, he was constantly being berated by his sergeants, his chief, and all that for not meeting his quota. So to solve the issue, basically what he did, he drove 2 blocks down from the white neighborhood into another predominantly black neighborhood and was able to meet his quota again. He talks about how, this goes in line with the thing that I previously said. Like if you don't meet your quota, the other cops on the force are gonna see you as a lazy motherfucker, right? They're gonna be like, what are you doing? Why are you on the police force if you're not catching anybody? There's crime. We need to stop people out there. There's dangerous people out there. We gotta catch them, right? And this is frankly ridiculous because it really just kind of promotes this idea that there are just bad people, right? That our environment does not make who we become. Because our environment does not create our ideas of what we need, what we want. It does not create senses of desperation. It does not create trauma. It just assumes that there are just bad people. And this notion in general also creates kind of a us versus them mentality, like I said before, where if you are in a white neighborhood and you're just not meeting your quota, and then you're able to go to a black neighborhood and you're just seeing just crime, poverty, all that, you subconsciously, maybe not even consciously, you develop this notion that somehow, in some way, these people are worse than us. They just can't seem to pick themselves up by their bootstraps, right? We always hear that, right? There's just something wrong with the way that they do things, and therefore we need to police them. If you just see things at that level, it really does seem like that, especially if you're coming from a predominantly cop-driven family, community, all of that. The division of communities in and of itself contributes to this problem greatly, just simply because people just don't understand what crime comes from. It's not the result of just people being bad because people are genetically inferior, just not smart, or even to some degree like, you know, the arts and like the music that motherfuckers listen to, right? I mean, there's always those arguments about like gangster rap promoting a whole bunch of violence and shit like that. And maybe to some degree it might be true, but it's not the issue. That's not the issue.
I mean, have you heard country music or like rock? Like,
I love that, exactly.
and we don't use that in court.
Exactly. So he also addresses how the state uses fear to keep officers in line. I don't know if you all know a lot about how police are trained, but it's pretty fucked up. Basically, they're shown a whole bunch of videos, body camera footage, cruiser cam footage of police being shot, killed. You know, these dudes are on the ground crying for their family, their mama, saying, "I'm sorry." It's the most horrendous shit you will ever see. It's brutal. You see the blood, you hear the fear, you hear the crying. It's shit you just don't want to see. And this reinforces the notion of, again, us versus them mentality, where you kind of just you're put in this position where it's just like, okay, well, either you know, you have this predisposed notion of danger, and so you come out of the situation thinking either he's going to kill me or I'm going to kill him, right? Who goes first, and who has the right to kill? The two previous examples that I showed before, the George Floyd picture and the January 6th, those were examples of police misconduct, but there's barely any punishment. There's no checks and balances. Nothing happens, and there's a reason why nothing happens. It's because the state is on their side. There is a monopoly of violence in that area, on that side of the line, the thin blue line that we always hear about, right? And these are some of his quotes that I also put into this. He said, "There is no walking and talking with the people." And in the interview, he was talking to this guy who was driving around in the car, and the guy kind of asked, like, "So, what do they see? Like, how do they see you when you're just walking around and talking to them?" And he was like, "There is no walking and talking with the people. We are an occupying force. That's what it is." He also says, "I've never feared the streets, but I constantly feared other officers." This man is from the Marine Corps. He's a cop. He was a cop for 11 years. Never feared the streets, but constantly feared other officers. How does the community, like, could we always see the reinforcement of oppression, of violence through fear in communities? And, like, for example, the fear that, oh, they're coming for our jobs, or oh, they're gonna take this away from us. They're dangerous. Their culture is too different. They don't understand. They don't hold our Western values, right? It's a threat. That's how it's said. Yes, he also said what they fear, in reference to the community. He was asked, "What do you think the people fear?" or something to that degree. It was, what they fear is that we can get away with whatever we choose to get away with. And then after that, he said, "I come in straight from the Marine Corps, that's ready to roll. We're gonna do our thing. I'm gonna put on a different uniform and continue my war." And that was kind of a statement on just imperialism in general, and how it doesn't only affect countries or other countries and other people, it also affects our own people. It's kind of I guess a sentiment to the notion that the state uses this monopoly on violence and just weapons and power and law and in general, and even in morality. We see this notion that, like, you know, we've always met those people who think that the things that the state, the status quo is like the moral way to go, right? This is how things have been, this is how things should be, because it's not dangerous, because it doesn't change things fundamentally, because it's, you know, it hasn't been tried, or it doesn't work, or whatever, right? There's this idea that morality in and of itself is that the state is moral. But when you see a state that does shit like this, to its own people, or other countries, and enforces this brutal superstructure of oppression which continues to provide us with prosperity. What morals are we upholding, right? Who, again, are we protecting and serving? And I want to finish this debugging with an adage, which is kind of the name. It's only a few bad apples, right? But the full adage is a few bad apples will spoil the bunch. What's going to happen if a few bad apples are the police chiefs, the commanders, or the politicians? The last one I'm addressing today is keeping us and our community safe, and this kind of goes in depth with, or more in depth with everything else I've been kind of talking about. Okay, so this guy, I don't know if you guys know him, he's Gary Webb. He was a journalist who exposed basically government conspiracies that were acted upon that caused the crack epidemic in the 80s. I have personal ties to this problem. My mom grew up in Harlem in the 80s. She grew up seeing people strung out on the corner, people losing their shit in the stairway, stray needles everywhere. She was always aware of where she was stepping or where she was sleeping because she didn't want to be poked by a stray needle. Her dad, which might be a little personal, but my grandpa, her dad, was a crackhead. It ruined the family, and many other people in my family were ruined by that, right? It was a massive problem. And what happened after this in and of itself was used to justify kind of the draconian police that we see today in our communities, and not just these communities, and just black communities, but in communities in general, especially people display sentiments that don't go along with the status quo. When addressing the notion that the police keep us in our community safe, to address that, we have to kind of fight back and, throw in some other point. Like, I'll just, name something, right? Government operations to destabilize and impoverish communities in America, South America, Central America, and basically all over the world. Gary Webb, his books, The Dark Alliance, is a trilogy as far as I'm aware, where he talks about his experiences doing investigative journalism, where he learned about where these drugs were coming from, how they were getting into the country, and how they were getting to specific communities. There's a reason why they didn't end up in white communities as much as they did in black communities. It's a very specific reason, and I'm pretty sure all of you are. We know about that. We know back now how that could have happened. Another one, destruction of the Black Panthers, Rainbow Coalition, and unions. We had other presenters address union oppression. There's also the horrible treatment of the Black Panthers, which was a civil rights movement, and basically community movement, as well as the Rainbow Coalition, which did a lot of work with the Black Panthers, and they were all looking to create a united front, a united body to better the world. And guess what happened? Black Panthers were designated a terrorist organization. The FBI infiltrated that and destabilized the organization. Basically, I don't know if any of you know this, but every single organized gang in the United States came from the Black Panthers and movements associated with the Black Panthers. I'm talking the Crips, I'm talking the Bloods, I'm talking the Vice Kings, or the Vice Lords, I'm talking Latin Kings, I'm talking GD, BD, everything. Every single one of those organizations came from a civil rights movement. And because of this thorough destabilization of the community, they eventually devolved into criminal organizations. And to top it off, had crack. you know? Take out all the money. Redline the community, the entire community. Separate people. Make one side look dangerous, make the other side afraid. What do you think is gonna happen? Another one, Operation Northwoods. I don't know if you guys know about this, but basically it was a proposed false flag by the CIA to bomb shopping malls on American soil, basically kill our own American citizens, blame it on the Cuban government, and declare and justify a war with Cuba. Luckily that didn't happen, right? But the very idea, the very fact that they thought about doing that, it just kind of destroys this notion of keeping us and our community safe. If that was true, where were the police when all this shit was happening? What happened, right? Why was this allowed to happen? Who were they protecting? Who were they protecting, right? What was going on with that? What happened? I don't know. When you're in the police force, when you're faced with this kind of divide, you're met with these people, you're met with, you basically just an occupied force. You really do come to kind of an ideological crossroads, right? Kind of as I touched on before. If you're in predominantly white neighborhoods, which are better off, versus predominantly black neighborhoods, which are worse off. Most of the time, especially if you're uneducated, and if you don't have a good, strong cultural backing, diverse backing of understanding that people aren't inherently like this, it's easy to just come to the notion that these people are just black, or the left, or whoever you want to blame, are just insane, just violent, not oppressive, but like dangerous. Really creates this notion of danger. And what happens with that when you see this overt oppression of people, not only again in our own soil, but in other countries around the world. And when you see how these countries are, but you're not educated enough to understand why they're like that, you can come to some pretty dangerous ideas. You can come to accept some pretty dangerous notions, some sentiments, right? And one of those are superior values than the rest, right? The superior Western values, the values that allow us in the West to have a society like we do. They're supposedly the reason why we prosper. It's democracy, it's this, it's that, it's our religion, it gave us morality or whatever, right? It's anything having to do with what happened in the West for the last 2,000 years at least. Right? When you look at what happens, when you look at black neighborhoods, impoverished neighborhoods, other communities, other nations, and see the poverty, the war, all that, but you're uneducated, not educated enough to understand why that happened, you could come to think that it's just dangerous people, and you need to be vigilant about that. And if you kind of follow my train of thought, you kind of see where I'm going with this. It's a dangerous train of thought. It's a slippery slope. It leads to some pretty dangerous things. For example, the Oath Keepers member list was leaked. I'm not exactly sure when, but more than 370 people in law enforcement and 100 in the military are part of this organization. Now, this organization is a far-right militia, which subscribes to the Trumpist notions, the far-right ideas, all of that shit. Many of them are neo-Nazis, through and through. 80 people from this organization were running or served in public office. And just to put that in perspective, in 1920, the German Workers' Party was made of less than 60 members. 60, 1920. In 1945, that number was 8.9 billion. Does anybody know what the German Workers' Party was?
Nazis.
Exactly. 25 years. just that small. 60, less than 60 to 25 years. These people in Oath Keepers have 38,000 people in their ranks, and that's just the Oath Keepers. There's 3 percenters. There are many other militias and organizations just like that. Not to mention the fact that we just had a president that was so extreme that he was basically using rhetoric from the Nazi playbook to get elected, blaming all of our problems on other people, calling them dangerous, inherently dangerous, right? All of that. Exactly how the Nazis got power. Exactly. Point by point. The material conditions create consciousness. This is one of the biggest notions of something called dialectical materialism. It's this idea is that like the environment you grow up in is going to create a person. It's because what you see and what you experience will thoroughly affect who you will become. If you grow up in an impoverished neighborhood, you're oppressed, you have no money, your family is torn apart by drugs, there's just no happiness anywhere. You know, your older brother might have killed himself, or whatever the fuck horrible shit could have happened to you. That's going to affect you for the rest of your life. Not to mention the people in other countries who, I mean, 1 million Iraqis dead because of that war. When that shit happens, when you see that, you come from this place of guttural rage. It doesn't just go away. And when you're met with these weird notions of just like, oh, forgive and forget, you need to, that's just, like, it's hard to do that. You understand? And there's a reason. It's because this system is extreme, and so it breeds extremism. In order to defend the system, you need to be extreme. In order to upturn the system, you need to be extreme. Black and white. It's very black and white. Just to wrap it up, our current system both creates the problem, then merely treats the symptoms using its monopoly on violence. It divides and conquers, but it never addresses the root problem. Because the system is inherently oppressive, the institutions of policing can and will not protect and serve. And as the system and the country continue to become even more and more radicalized, so will the status quo. There's nothing in that status quo that's worth protecting. Almost nothing. And these are my closing remarks. Understanding the root of the problem is crucial. Crucial. Educating yourself on these issues is very crucial as well. Very crucial. You should not just take other people's word for it. Don't even take my word for it. Do your own research. You can. I did too. Come to your own, after having done that, come to your own conclusions. Because the system in and of itself must change. It has to address all these issues that we have with not only campus police, but brutality on basically every part of the spectrum, right? It has to be addressed. People need to be educated. They have to be. Just policing is impossible. Just policing in and of itself is impossible in an unjust system. It just can't happen the way that we think it should. It's just not how it works. A system that pits the community against each other is fundamentally rotten and decrepit. And for my last one, conformity to a sick system is our pesticide. It's our sickness. And that's something that has to be done away with. And yeah, that's it.
That was awesome, Shimo.
I appreciate it.
Okay, so if you are also feeling enraged, I'm sure you're wondering what you can do about it. So Truman is going to talk about some things that we, as students and student organizers, can do.
I want to thank the rest of our speakers. I'll try and make sure I'll keep this happy so we have some time to discuss and we can move on. We've been there a while. First, before I get on, I'm just going to do a quick acknowledgement of the land Auraria is on.
both of the indigenous Arapaho and Cheyenne communities that were once here, as well as the original Aurarian community that was displaced to make way for the Auraria campus. I want to get that out of the way and just talk about, now what can we do? It's tough when people come here complaining, but they don't have solutions. We have solutions. We're not whiners. We're here to make something happen. So hopefully y'all have seen from our previous speakers why this issue matters so much. We've seen the origin of police are racist and classist in their origin, both as slave patrols and union busters. We've seen the failures of campus police, including the failures of ACPD, both to keep track of their own equipment. In the past, they've failed to promptly respond to issues of sexual assault and domestic violence, allowing them to continue. And as we've seen with Shimo, Shimo and our previous speakers debunk some of the myths many of us have heard. The idea of protecting and serving. And as we've seen, they really don't have any obligation to protect and serve. So, what should we do about it? Well, there are solutions that work, that are out there right now. One of the biggest ones is the Denver STAR program. This is the Support Team Assisted Response Program. And what they do is they send nonviolent mental health experts and physicians and paramedics, that's what I'm looking for, to nonviolent crimes rather than armed police officers. And these people are trained to de-escalate situations peacefully and promptly. And just in the first couple of years we've seen it, it has had an astounding effect, better than anyone's expected. See a 34% reported drop in some crimes in the area. It's massive. We're not the only city that's done this. The city of Eugene, Oregon has a program that goes by the CAHOOTS program. It's very similar to the Denver STAR program. They have vans with paramedics and mental health experts that respond to calls. And this has prevented thousands of arrests and saved the city millions of dollars. We've also seen in college campuses, we've seen successful efforts just like this to get to withdraw from the 1033 program. The University of Maryland, they campaigned to have their police withdraw from the 1033 program, and they did. They sent back 50 M16s and an armor truck, over 70 gun sights, and over 300 magazines, among other equipment. So organizing works. Being active works. We don't have to accept the conditions we've given. We can do something about them. So this is where we come in. And this is where our campaign to demilitarize the police come in. So who are we? We are students for a democratic society. We're a student-led, student-motivated, 100% from the students, by the students organization that is dedicated to fighting for these progressive causes, such as demilitarization. We have our origins in the anti-war movement of the 60s and 70s, and continue to uphold those ideals. And so currently our campaign, we are demanding that ACPD immediately withdraw from the 1033 program, and that they return all weapons, equipment, any other ordinances they receive through this program. And we demand that they also halt the construction of any additional police resources or infrastructure on campus. For example, there's a new proposed safety building, which is really just another glorified police department on campus. And we think that those funds that would go to 1033 and other expanded police services instead should go to starting our very own Auraria STAR program. That way we can have nonviolent experts respond to nonviolent issues, and they can be here to support our community and make it a better place. So, what can you do to help us with this? Well, obviously, you can get involved with SDS and our campaign here on campus. We have a lovely table set up right there, where you can hear more from us, more from what we're doing. We're having a meeting, actually, right after this, 6 o'clock in the North Building, where we, talk about planning our events, stuff like this. Get involved. You can also sign our petition at the very least. Let campus know that this matters to you, that you want to change, that you want to see change. Some more things you can do is get educated and get involved with the wider movement. There are a lot of organizations throughout the greater Denver area that care about these issues, that are working on these issues, that work closely with us. The Denver Justice Initiative is one. Another really important one is the Denver Aurora Civilian Action Council. Did I say that right, somebody?
Community Action Committee.
Community Action Committee. The Denver Aurora Community Action Committee. I want to give them a quick shout out because there actually is going to be a budget hearing for the Denver Police Department coming up soon, and I'm trying to pull up the date. But, so our friends over at the Denver Aurora Action Committee have been helping us and are currently getting movement to let the Denver City Council know about these issues as well. That's going to be on October 24th at 5:30 p.m. at the Denver City and County Building on 1437 Bannock Street. I want to give a big shout out because this movement doesn't start. It can't be just students. It can't be just certain groups of people. We all got to work together to see a change in our society. So, thank you all for coming, and thank you for listening to us. This my quick piece about what we're doing, how you can get involved. Just come talk to any of us. We're all throughout this room. Thanks.
I'm so glad you pointed that out, Truman. Getting organized is so important because they want us to believe that we can't change the world. And on our own as a single person, we can't. But when we organize, we can. And there's strength in numbers, and we can show them that we are determined and we will fight against this and we won't give up together. So please get organized. It's super important with the organizations in your community. This is the time we're going to open the floor for questions. So if you want to direct it towards any of our panelists or any of us in the group, but again, it's not a debate club, but we recommend people with any questions. There's no such thing as stupid questions. Just don't come here to be combative. So, yes.
You mentioned the START program, obviously, super awesome. Waiting for it to go at the same time. I was wondering, so from campus, if you were to call 911 in a nonviolent situation that would normally work, the START program, if you were, across Spear or in Denver, does that extend to Auraria campus, or does it just kind of,
Don't believe the STAR program currently extends to Auraria campus. I believe those issues are addressed by Auraria police officers, as long as you're on campus. If you're once you're across Spear, then you're in Denver downtown, and so then Denver police will respond to that. The STAR program, I don't have exact numbers for how big it is. Tends to respond to about 1,500 calls in a year. I just don't think that. I think a year. But so as to whether they will respond with the STAR program, ideally, the STAR program itself has only arisen in the past 2 years, and it's almost been mostly in a proof of concept phase. The proof has been resounding that it has a beneficial effect.
I know. I also was told during my freshman orientation in the dormitories, they actually told us not to call 911 and instead to call the campus PD because they're closer. So I do believe that means the STAR does not extend to campus as a whole. But Sergio, do you?
Yeah, to give an example, I work at Spirit Commons, and there was a little incident that happened there. It was just the ACPD that arrived. No one really else. It was STAR. Right.
Yeah, it's also just the weird, don't call 911, call the ACP.
Like people are gonna remember the ACPD number off the top of their head in an emergency.
Yeah, so it's more of so if you do call 911, will you get to the Denver police?
I was told, this was 2 years ago when I had this orientation, so I don't know if it's changed, but I was told that because ACPD is closer, that 911 will actually then direct you to ACPD and they'll still be the ones to respond. So that's why they were saying to call them, because you'd get an even longer response if you didn't, because they would direct it to the ACPD. But that was 2 years ago, I don't know if it's changed. Do we have any other questions, comments? Paul?
I just had a comment I wanted to share. I was one of the students that went to Kent State over the last weekend, where we actually went to the site of the massacre. And yeah, I guess I'll just come to the front. And so we went to Kent State, Ohio, stood directly where that guy had his head just blown out on the ground. And we had a member of faculty who had been a part of what was called the May 4th Committee. Because, you know, through the rest of the 70s, the 80s, and into the 90s until the late 90s, they didn't recognize that what happened to Kent State happened. It was just swept under the rug. People called the students that died terrorists. We're talking about 19-year-old students, 20-year-old students, just like us, right, or close to us, right, who stood up against the invasion into Cambodia. Vietnam had been roaring on, right? They were sending black and brown people to the very front lines in Vietnam. And all sorts of horrible things were happening there. We were napalming civilians and committing horrible, horrible acts of war crimes, right? And so students with a conscience and with an idea of what was happening stood up once they invaded Cambodia. And that's what happened around May 3rd, May 4th. Now, and they did so, you know, gosh, I'm rambling a little bit, but I want to say that some of the things that we learned, 3 out of the 4 students that were murdered were Jewish. And they tried setting up a pride memorial afterwards, and through the 80s and 90s, it got riddled with bullets, subject to all sorts of further hate. And so, you know, when we talk about the Kent State Massacre, I understand that this isn't a history that's remembered, right? A lot of people you talk to don't know about Kent State. And even there at Kent State, in the year 2022, there are people still referring to the students who died as terrorists, right? Didn't have any guns. The only student with a gun there was an FBI infiltrator. That's a fact. You know, there were about 2,000 students there. Some of them couldn't even hear the order to disperse, you know, and they lied that they had declared martial law. And so imagine you're at the heart of a big movement. I know many of you were probably part of the George Floyd protests. Imagine being at the heart of a big rally. There's some quiet call to disperse, and then all of a sudden, you know, you didn't hear it. And all of a sudden you hear gunshots, people screaming, right?
For 13 seconds.
For 13 seconds, right? But this
Put
13
in your
seconds,
head,
probably
it
like 10
seems-
minutes,
Yeah.
I imagine. But one of the faculty who had been witness to there said that when they saw the student, they saw like a river of blood. This guy, just, you know, horrible. Some of our fellow students that were there at the site were in tears, moved
I
by
think
the.
all of our fellow students at the site were in tears.
Either you're there or you're shocked cold
Yeah.
because of the understanding that this is a history that goes unremembered, right? And people say things like never again, never here, but in order to get there, we need to remember that history and understand the capacity that weapons have on our campus too. People want to put weapons that were much worse than the ones that committed the Kent State Massacre in the hands of the police on our campus. And we need to be cognizant of that history. Orangeburg happened with, you know, just close right after, and we're talking about black students, and that goes even, you know, we can imagine that that's even less remembered by this country and not really taught about. So, yeah, Kent State, it was insane to hear about and to read about, but to actually be there and to hear from other students about how this is still something that's controversial.
It was really powerful.
It's nuts, and it should light a fire under all our asses when it comes to like making change on this campus, because it could happen again, and in fact, it could be much, much worse, because we're not talking about M1 Garands. That's what these National Guardsmen had. We're talking about M16s, the very guns they used in My Lai in Vietnam to massacre men, women, and children. Just insane. And you know, some people might say, "Oh, you know, have you tried talking to the police?" You know, That's a myth I'll dispel really quick. We did. We came to this room several, probably about half a year ago, we went to a community advisory board meeting. We asked the police, we're like, what are you buying with this program? What kind of weapons are you obtaining? What kind of military surplus? And they lied to us. They stood there and they said, oh, well, you know, I graduated from Metro. I'm just a little member of your community, you know? All we're getting are binoculars and some golf carts. When in reality, we listened to that and we were like, yeah, I don't know about that. And so our member Kat, shouts out Kat, put in a CORA request, Colorado Open Records Act request, and we got the pictures. Sent them to us on a disc, pictures of the M16s, information about the sites. We found out they'd lied to us about it. And so understand that the police on your campus are militarizing and they do not want you to know about it. And so this should be good reason to like stay vigilant, you know? So that's what I got.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was good.
That was good.
I was wondering, but
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Yes.
I was wondering if you all know about other student groups who are working on this, because I know that y'all aren't the only ones. But just across any of them that like maybe comes to mind.
Keegan, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So there are not that much political groups on campuses on this campus in particular. There is the Coalition for Restorative Justice, which we are in contact with. We work with the Brazen Project, although not on this particular issue. But if you or anybody here knows of any other student activist groups, we would love to connect because we feel like there in our experience we haven't seen anybody out here doing like tackling this kind of issue. And when we've invited like campus sponsored groups like the Latinx Student Alliance and the Black Student Alliance, they haven't come out just because those groups aren't really political, which is totally fine. But yeah, the coalition is the only one, and the Brazen Project is the only one that comes to mind when we're talking about student groups on campus that are politically active.
Yeah, and not even necessarily ones that are specifically politically active, but I know, like, I think, I haven't actually worked with them a huge enough, but like, when I first started coming here, I had a few conversations and went to a few Zoom meetings with the Student Government Assembly for MSU. And
Paul's the
That's Paul.
and I know that was a conversation that they were having a bit with X specifically.
I'm part of the MSU student government, and I'm not here by that capacity. I have to say because of the rules of our student government.
Yes.
But I will say that they'll have that conversation. But
Okay.
this campaign needs to be a lot more than conversations. I'm trying to work within student government to get something like this, like tangible and through, but it's a struggle.
And I will say, as for students off campus, we are actively trying to reach out to other groups and other campuses and other groups. We had a convention this past weekend where we had a national convention and got to meet SDS organizers and other campuses work on this issue. We're also we're working on reaching out to other organizations and like-minded organizations to really build this united front against police brutality and systemic racism. And so that's actually one of the things somebody talked about at our meeting tonight. So we are actively trying to reach out to more groups. This one I'll say, this is almost like a reach out to us. So if anyone else knows any groups like this that would be interested in collaborating us with this, please reach out to us. It's so important. Nothing can be done by ourselves. And so it's critical that we work with other groups and movements for this.
Yeah, organizing is extremely important. So, groups, talk, everyone, spread the word. Do we have any last questions, comments before we wrap this up? No? Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm so glad to see you here, and I would also love to see some new faces at our SDS meeting tonight. It's going to be at 6 p.m. in North 1408. North 1408, 6 p.m. Would love to see you there. We're going to be doing more planning for organizing and talking about Kent talking about cementing this, and what are you signaling?
Or sign up. And sign up over here.
Yes,
Yeah, sign the petition,
sign
sign
up
for our
sheets
email list.
For our email